Solomon's legacy stands unmatched in the annals of ancient wisdom. As both king and sage, his life embodied a rare combination of divine insight and earthly authority. But what truly sets him apart is not merely the wealth he accumulated or the influence he wielded. It is the source of his understanding. Solomon's wisdom was not a product of human reasoning or intellectual refinement. It was a supernatural gift, requested in humility and granted by divine favor. When he asked for wisdom to lead well, he received something more potent than strategy or intellect. He was given a spiritual lens, a way of seeing life through the eyes of heaven. His writings, particularly the Book of Proverbs, remain one of the most concentrated collections of divine principles ever recorded. Though often overlooked as simple maxims or moral sayings, they are in fact deeply encoded truths, frameworks that contain the blueprint for a prosperous, peaceful, and purpose-filled life. Solomon was not trying to impress with poetry. He was trying to preserve eternal laws of order, discipline, and spiritual alignment. Each proverb is more than a sentence. It is a seed capable of producing fruit when planted in the heart and acted upon with intention. In today's world, where endless advice flows from countless voices, the clarity of Solomon's wisdom cuts through the noise. We are surrounded by strategies for success, formulas for wealth, and steps to self-improvement, but very few of these methods are rooted in spiritual truth. What Solomon offers is not a motivational framework, but a divine map. His words reach beyond intellect to touch the soul, offering guidance that speaks not only to what we do, but to who we are becoming. This is why his wisdom remains relevant, because it speaks to conditions that have never changed: the state of the heart, the struggle for purpose, and the pursuit of lasting peace. What often goes unnoticed is how deliberately Solomon grounds his wisdom in spiritual alignment. He does not begin with practical advice or self-help encouragement. He begins with reverence. His approach reminds us that true understanding cannot be separated from the fear of the Lord, which is the doorway to all higher knowledge. Without this reverence, wisdom becomes hollow, easily twisted by ego or used for selfish gain. But with it, insight becomes transformative. Solomon teaches that knowledge alone is not enough. Only wisdom, filtered through humility and guided by truth, can lead to a life of fulfillment. This introduction is not just an invitation to study an ancient text. It is a call to rediscover a way of living. Solomon's Proverbs offer a pattern of life that transcends cultural trends and economic systems. They speak to the eternal structure of how things are meant to function, how order leads to increase, how humility leads to honor, and how discipline leads to freedom. His wisdom does not oppose ambition, it purifies it. It does not condemn wealth, it defines it. And most importantly, it teaches that success without peace is no success at all. To follow Solomon's path is to choose depth over distraction, design over disorder, and substance over spectacle. It is to build life on principles that cannot be shaken. And though the world may offer faster methods or flashier promises, only the wisdom rooted in God's truth can produce results that endure. Solomon has left the code. The question is whether we will take the time to read it, apply it, and walk in the life it promises to unlock. Solomon opens the Book of Proverbs with a declaration that defines the foundation of all true wisdom. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Proverbs 1 verse 7. This statement is not a poetic introduction or a religious flourish. It is the cornerstone upon which every other insight stands. Without this foundational fear, wisdom loses its direction. It may become cleverness, intellect, or charm, but it will lack the power to bring transformation, clarity, and divine favor. Solomon's message is simple. If you want to understand life deeply, you must begin by reverencing the one who created it. The term fear in this context does not mean terror or dread. It is not the fear of punishment, nor is it rooted in shame or anxiety. It is a posture of awe, a sacred recognition of God's holiness, authority, and sovereignty. This fear produces honor, not avoidance. It does not paralyze, but humbles. It is the inward response of the heart that knows it stands before a power far greater than itself, and yet feels invited, not rejected. To fear the Lord is to understand one's proper place, not as insignificant, but as dependent. This reverence becomes the key that unlocks wisdom. Without it, even the most gifted mind remains blind to spiritual truth. Solomon emphasizes that knowledge gained without reverence will only inflate pride. But when fear of the Lord governs a person's inner life, wisdom follows. The mind becomes teachable, the heart becomes sensitive, and decisions begin to align with a higher order. This fear acts like a compass. It keeps direction true even when circumstances shift or feelings waver. Reverence also produces clarity. Many people struggle with confusion not because they lack information, but because they lack alignment. When a person fears God, they begin to see beyond surface-level options. They discern motives, sense timing, and recognize when a path, though popular, is unwise. Reverence invites light into dark places. It makes one aware of subtle dangers, hidden opportunities, and the deeper meanings behind what is seen. This is not superstition. It is spiritual perception made possible by humility. Solomon places this fear at the start of everything because he knows how easily the heart can become proud. Wisdom is powerful, but without reverence it becomes dangerous. It turns inward, serving ego rather than purpose. Reverence guards against this. It reminds the soul that all understanding is a gift, not a possession. It protects the wise from becoming arrogant and the successful from becoming self-absorbed. Reverence keeps the heart low, even when the life rises high. This fear also becomes the gate to relational wisdom. Those who walk in reverence do not treat others lightly. They speak with care, listen with intention, and honor what is sacred in another person. Reverence softens the heart toward correction and makes room for reconciliation. It produces a kind of discernment that goes beyond logic. It teaches how to read between words, to sense character, and to know when to speak or stay silent. This level of relational intelligence is not learned in books. It is given to those who honor God above their own emotions. Even in decision-making, reverence becomes the stabilizing force. The person who fears the Lord does not rush into action based on impulse. They pause, they inquire, they wait for peace before proceeding. This habit, rooted in fear, saves them from unnecessary detours. It protects investments, preserves energy, and guards time. Reverence is not hesitation. It is preparation. It is the deep trust that waiting on divine direction is always better than reacting from fear or pressure. This posture also invites favor. Solomon's life proves this. When he could have asked for riches, victory, or long life, he asked for understanding. His request pleased God because it revealed a heart aligned with heaven's values. And because he feared rightly, he was entrusted with more than he asked. This pattern remains. When a person lives in reverence, they prove themselves trustworthy, and heaven entrusts more insight, more responsibility, more influence. In contrast, those who reject reverence often drift toward confusion, pride, and ultimately loss. Without fear of the Lord, life becomes centered around self. Decisions become shallow, relationships become transactional, and peace becomes fleeting. The world may admire confidence without reverence, but such confidence is hollow. It cannot sustain in difficulty, nor can it guide in complexity. Reverence is what roots strength. It is the unseen foundation beneath visible success. To begin with fear is to begin well. It is not a limitation but a launch point. It does not reduce freedom. It defines it. Those who fear the Lord are not bound by religious pressure, but set free by divine order. They walk with peace in chaos, with clarity in noise, and with confidence that their steps are guided by something far greater than circumstance. Solomon's entire body of wisdom begins here, because without this posture, nothing else will hold. Reverence is not the end of learning. It is where true learning finally begins. Among the many declarations Solomon offered, there is one that stands with startling authority, piercing through generations and cultures with the weight of eternal truth. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Proverbs 4, verse 23, is not simply poetic advice. It is a diagnostic instruction meant to realign the source of our behaviors, decisions, and even destinies. To guard the heart is not to suppress emotion or isolate oneself from the world, but to cultivate a protected space from which all life proceeds. It is a command, not a suggestion, and one that speaks to the undeniable truth that the condition of the inner world determines the outcomes of the outer one. The heart, in Solomon's writings, is not merely the seat of feeling. It is the core of one's being, the center where thoughts, desires, motives, and beliefs converge. It is both compass and engine, simultaneously directing and empowering every other function of life. When the heart is healthy, actions become purposeful, words become weighty, and relationships become meaningful. But when the heart is infected by bitterness, pride, fear, or confusion, everything that flows from it becomes distorted. That is why Solomon does not tell us to guard our income, status, reputation, or opportunities first. He places the heart above all, because if the heart is off, everything else becomes unstable, no matter how it may appear on the surface. In a society obsessed with metrics and external validation, it is easy to prioritize output over origin. People monitor their productivity, income, influence, and achievement, often without ever stopping to assess the state of the place from which those things originate. The result is a world of polished dysfunction, lives that look admirable but collapse in private. Marriages break under hidden resentment, businesses implode under unchecked ambition, and faith unravels under unresolved doubt. Solomon knew that the visible fruit always mirrors the invisible root, and so he spoke directly to the source. Guarding the heart is not an act of paranoia, it is a discipline of intentionality. It means filtering what enters and evaluating what stays. It requires vigilance against the slow creep of offense, the subtle erosion caused by unaddressed wounds, and the silent influence of voices that do not align with wisdom. Many individuals wonder why they feel stagnant, confused, or overwhelmed, yet rarely consider that they may have left their hearts unguarded, open to every opinion, every criticism, every fleeting pleasure or distraction. Consider how easily bitterness can take root. A single offense left unattended begins to cloud perspective. Over time, the wound becomes a filter through which every interaction is viewed. Trust diminishes, joy fades, and yet the world around remains unchanged. What changed was the lens of the heart. Left unguarded, even truth is distorted. And when decisions are made from a wounded heart, they rarely lead to restoration. Instead, they echo the brokenness within and replicate it outwardly, in relationships, in leadership, and in vision. Distractions are no less dangerous. In Proverbs, Solomon repeatedly warns against paths that seem right but lead to destruction. The heart, when overstimulated by trivial pursuits or numbed by constant entertainment, loses its sensitivity to what matters. Guarding the heart, therefore, also involves quieting the noise. It means choosing stillness over constant movement, substance over spectacle. The guarded heart remains focused while others drift. It senses divine timing while others chase trends. It holds peace while the world demands panic. There is also the issue of emotional mismanagement. A heart that is unguarded is vulnerable to manipulation by others, by culture, or by its own unchecked impulses. Guarding the heart does not mean suppressing emotion, but stewarding it. Emotions are signals, not sovereigns. They are meant to inform, not to rule. When the heart is guarded, anger becomes a call to justice rather than a license for harm. Grief becomes a passage to healing rather than an anchor to despair. Passion becomes fuel for purpose rather than a wildfire of chaos. The heart must also be guarded against pride. Perhaps no other toxin corrupts the heart so subtly, yet so powerfully. Pride whispers flattery to the soul and numbs it to correction. It creates a false sense of invincibility while weakening the very foundation it boasts upon. A guarded heart is teachable. It recognizes that wisdom is not a possession to defend, but a treasure to expand. It welcomes truth even when it stings, because it values growth more than comfort. Solomon himself, though gifted with divine insight, fell prey to unguarded pride later in life. His downfall serves as a solemn reminder that no level of understanding exempts one from the need to guard the heart. The benefits of guarding the heart are not merely spiritual, they are practical and transformative. Emotional clarity leads to better decisions. Relational integrity fosters deeper connections. Mental peace enhances productivity and resilience. Even financial stewardship improves when decisions are rooted in a healthy internal compass. The heart, when guarded, becomes a channel for divine wisdom to flow without obstruction. It attracts favor not because of manipulation, but because of alignment. To guard the heart is also to be aware of its tendencies. Proverbs 14 verse 12 reminds us that there is a way that seems right to a man, but in the end it leads to death. The unguarded heart often confuses comfort with correctness. It leans into familiarity even when that familiarity is toxic. It rationalizes compromise, justifies delay, and resists change. Guarding the heart, then, requires confrontation. It means exposing self-deception and confronting patterns that do not serve purpose. This is why introspection is essential. A guarded heart is not hardened, it is examined. It is a garden, not a fortress, and like any garden it must be weeded regularly. Bitterness must be uprooted, pride trimmed back, and fear replaced with faith. It must be watered with truth, nourished with gratitude, and exposed to the light of divine presence. A well-tended heart becomes not only a sanctuary for the soul, but a source of life for others. From such a heart, counsel flows with clarity, love radiates with power, and leadership carries weight beyond charisma. The wisdom of Solomon invites us into a lifestyle of heart awareness, not emotional indulgence or stoic suppression. It is the art of tending to what lies beneath the surface. In a noisy and distracted age, it is a radical discipline, but it is also the path to wholeness. Success that springs from a guarded heart is sustainable. Influence rooted in a healthy heart carries integrity. Faith that flows from such a place is unshakable. Solomon's wisdom was not poetic idealism, it was divine architecture. And at the center of that design lies the heart, protected and prioritized. Within all the images Solomon could have chosen to represent wisdom in action, the ant stands as an unlikely teacher. Small in stature, voiceless in warning, easily overlooked by the passing eye. Yet in Proverbs 6 verses 6 through 8, Solomon urges the sluggard to go to the ant, observe its ways, and become wise. This invitation is not a poetic flourish or an appeal to nature for entertainment's sake. It is a direct appeal to learn from what the world often deems insignificant. The ant, though simple and without hierarchy, demonstrates qualities that align with the rhythms of heaven: diligence, foresight, order, and self-motivation. These are not merely virtues for a productive life, they are the foundations of a spiritually sustainable one. Solomon does not issue this call in a vacuum. He speaks to a human tendency to wait for instruction, to delay action, and to depend on external pressure for motivation. The ant, by contrast, works without a commander, overseer, or ruler, preparing its food in the summer and gathering its provision at harvest. This image is potent because it highlights a principle that transcends natural effort, an internal posture of faithfulness. Diligence is not about frantic motion or obsessive striving. It is about consistency with purpose. The ant does not run aimlessly, but moves intentionally, building with foresight and laboring with discipline. Its work is unseen, quiet, and humble, but the results are undeniable. In contrast to the modern obsession with hustle culture, where activity is often mistaken for effectiveness and burnout is worn as a badge of honor, Solomon offers a more sacred rhythm. Diligence, as he presents it, is not about urgency, but about stewardship. It is not driven by fear of failure, but by an understanding of divine responsibility. The diligent person does not chase outcomes, but honors process. They understand that time is a sacred currency and that every task, no matter how small, is a platform for faithfulness. This kind of labor does not deplete the soul, it sharpens it. There is a divine intelligence embedded in diligence. Solomon does not contrast the ant with the lazy out of disdain, but out of insight. Laziness, in his writing, is not just a behavioral flaw, but a spiritual misalignment. It disconnects the person from seasons, from purpose, and from responsibility. A sluggard does not merely waste time, they miss timing. When the season for sowing passes and the harvest window closes, no amount of late effort can reclaim the opportunity lost. The ant is wise not because it works hard, but because it works on time. It perceives the season and acts accordingly. That perception is spiritual. It is awareness that labor must align with the rhythm of purpose. In Proverbs 10 verse 4, Solomon declares that lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth. Again, the contrast is not just about income levels, but about posture. Poverty, in Solomon's framework, often refers to more than financial lack. It is also the result of missed purpose, unused talent, and neglected responsibility. Diligence, therefore, is about activating potential. It is the tool through which God tests and prepares individuals for more. If one cannot be faithful with a little, they cannot be trusted with abundance. The ant thrives not because it receives more than others, but because it multiplies what it has through consistent effort. The spiritual dimension of diligence becomes clearer when we consider that many miracles in Scripture are preceded by acts of obedience. The widow who gathered jars in preparation for oil, the servants who filled the water pots before wine appeared, the disciples who cast their nets again after toiling all night. These were not passive recipients of divine intervention. They were active participants, diligent even when the outcome seemed uncertain. Heaven often moves in response to faith expressed through discipline. Solomon understood that effort, when aligned with wisdom, attracts divine blessing. Diligence also trains the soul in patience and humility. The ant does not achieve in a day what it needs for the season, yet it continues without complaint. There is no applause, no audience, no immediate reward, yet the work goes on. This kind of unseen labor cultivates strength. It anchors identity, not in visible success, but in inner resolve. It sharpens character and deepens endurance. The diligent do not need external affirmation to validate their effort because they understand that God sees what is done in secret, and what is built in secret cannot be easily shaken in public. In the current age of instant results and viral recognition, the idea of slow, consistent labor is often dismissed as outdated. Yet Solomon's wisdom proves otherwise. What is built fast often collapses faster. But what is built diligently, layer upon layer, can withstand pressure, endure storms, and carry others. The ant does not know spectacle. It knows structure. Its wisdom lies in repetition, in order, in unwavering commitment. These same principles apply to every domain of life, whether building a career, nurturing a relationship, growing in spiritual maturity, or managing finances. Discipline, not talent, is the real differentiator. Solomon does not praise the gifted above all, he praises the faithful. Talent without diligence is like a seed never planted. It holds potential, but produces nothing. Diligence is the act of sowing consistently, trusting that harvest comes not from impulse, but from intention. This is why Solomon warns repeatedly that laziness brings ruin. Not because rest is evil, but because passivity in the face of responsibility corrupts purpose. Rest is sacred when it follows labor, but when it precedes or replaces effort, it becomes a thief. The diligent are those whom heaven can trust with more, not because they seek more, but because they have proven reliable with less. This principle is echoed in the teachings of Jesus in the parable of the talents, where the master rewards the faithful steward, not based on how much he started with, but on what he did with what he was given. Solomon's admiration for diligence is not a call to exhaustion, but to alignment. When effort is focused, when time is honored, and when tasks are approached with reverence, even the most ordinary labor becomes sacred. There is also a communal aspect to diligence. Just as ants operate in coordination, building structures that support the entire colony, the diligent person understands that their work affects more than their own life. Parents who labor in love shape generations. Entrepreneurs who lead with integrity create spaces of purpose for others. Ministers who study and serve quietly prepare atmospheres where transformation can take place. Every act of diligence echoes beyond its moment. It builds legacies, not just results. Solomon, in pointing to the ant, invites us to embrace a lifestyle that resists both extremes, frantic ambition and apathetic delay. The goal is not to become mechanical in effort, but spiritual in intention. Diligence is not merely about doing more. It is about doing what matters with consistency and care. It is about bringing order where there is chaos, structure where there is randomness, and purpose where there is pressure. It is the quiet force that turns vision into reality, potential into fruit, and calling into fulfillment. Solomon declares in Proverbs 18 verse 21 that death and life are in the power of the tongue. With that single line, he exposes the hidden force behind so many blessings and so many devastations. Words are not neutral. They carry weight, and with them comes the potential to shape, uplift, wound, or destroy. In Solomon's world, speech is not just communication, it is creation. What we speak does not merely express what is inside us, it actively shapes the world around us, affecting our relationships, decisions, and even our future. The tongue, though small, becomes the steering wheel of a person's entire life. Throughout Proverbs, Solomon returns to the subject of speech more than almost any other topic. This repetition is no accident. He saw with precision how the spoken word could unravel the wise or elevate the humble. Words are not passive echoes of thought. They are instruments of influence. A kind word heals. A reckless word wounds. A wise answer diffuses anger. A flattering speech manipulates. The outcome is never incidental. The kind of words we choose to use set a direction, not just for others, but for ourselves. They build inner structure as much as outer relationships. There is a difference Solomon draws between empty speech and purposeful declaration. Empty speech fills the air but produces nothing of value. It may be gossip, flattery, impulsive opinion, or careless venting. Such speech creates confusion, drains energy, and corrodes trust. By contrast, purposeful speech, what Solomon would call the words of the wise, carries intention. It speaks with knowledge, but also with restraint. It builds confidence without deception. It corrects without crushing. It acknowledges pain without spreading despair. Purposeful words are not louder, they are truer. Solomon connects speech directly to integrity. In Proverbs 10 verse 19, he writes that when words are many, sin is not absent, pointing to the reality that unchecked speech often leads to error. Restraint is a sign of maturity. The wise do not speak to impress, they speak to edify. Their words are measured because they know that what is spoken cannot be taken back. They understand that timing, tone, and truth must walk hand in hand. Even good words, when spoken at the wrong time or in the wrong spirit, can do harm. Wisdom teaches not only what to say, but when to say it. Speech is also tied to identity. The words a person consistently speaks over themselves begin to define their internal reality. When someone says, "I'm not good enough" or "I always fail," they are not merely venting. They are training their mind and spirit to expect failure. Over time, the body and behavior begin to follow. But when someone speaks life, "I am growing, I am being shaped by truth, I will overcome," they are reinforcing vision, not illusion. Solomon understood that words reinforce belief, and belief determines outcome. Speech becomes the echo of the future we are building. Praise is one of the most powerful expressions of speech Solomon points to. Though often associated with worship alone, praise also functions as a spiritual weapon. It shifts focus from problem to promise. It invites joy into sorrow. It realigns perspective in moments of pressure. Praise, spoken aloud, has the power to break anxiety and stir strength. It is not escapism, it is alignment. When words are used to celebrate what is good, even before circumstances change, the heart is strengthened. Proverbs 15 verse 23 tells us that a person finds joy in giving an apt reply. Words spoken rightly, even in struggle, can produce joy. Speech also shapes community. Relationships thrive or collapse based on how people speak to and about one another. Solomon condemns gossip not because it is merely rude, but because it corrodes the fabric of trust. He praises gentle answers, not because they sound nice, but because they de-escalate conflict and restore dignity. Words are bridges or barriers. The difference between healing and division often comes down to how something was said. Solomon's wisdom shows that speaking well is not just about avoiding offense. It is about cultivating life wherever you go. When it comes to leadership, Solomon's Proverbs elevate speech to a tool of governance. A ruler who speaks in haste brings ruin. A leader who speaks wisely secures loyalty and respect. The same principle applies to personal influence. Whether in a home, a workplace, or among friends, the way we speak reveals whether we are leading from wisdom or reacting from impulse. Solomon teaches that the wise store up knowledge, but release it with care. Their influence is felt not because they speak often, but because they speak meaningfully. Ultimately, Solomon's view of speech is deeply spiritual. Words are not random. They are seeds. They carry consequences. They either align us with truth or push us toward deception. When someone chooses to guard their tongue, they are not practicing censorship. They are practicing stewardship. They are recognizing that what is spoken either builds or tears down, nourishes or drains. The person who learns to speak with purpose, faith, and restraint carries within them a tool more powerful than wealth or charm: the ability to shape reality with wisdom. Solomon's wisdom on speech invites reflection. What am I building with my words? Am I speaking life into my own future or reinforcing defeat? Am I creating safety with my words or tension? Am I echoing truth or amplifying noise? These questions are not meant to induce guilt, but to inspire a shift. Because when the tongue is trained by wisdom, it becomes not just a tool of communication, but a channel through which peace, growth, and purpose flow freely. In Proverbs 15, verse 33, Solomon offers a principle that seems to cut against the grain of almost every natural instinct and cultural narrative. Before honor comes humility. This statement is not a poetic reversal, nor is it meant to inspire meekness for its own sake. It is a revelation of divine architecture, a spiritual law embedded in the very fabric of destiny. Honor, in Solomon's understanding, is not simply recognition or praise. It is elevation, influence, and the weight of responsibility carried with grace. And according to this ancient wisdom, the only road that truly leads to such elevation is one of lowered posture, a life anchored not in self-glorification, but in the quiet confidence of humility. The world teaches something altogether different. From childhood, people are often conditioned to assert themselves, demand attention, highlight their strengths, and resist any perception of weakness. The culture of success promotes visibility over substance, charisma over character, and applause over authenticity. In such a landscape, humility is often seen as a liability, a trait that hinders progress or slows the race toward prominence. But Solomon, having seen the rise and fall of kings, the unfolding of destiny, and the destruction of pride, writes with the authority of one who knows better. He understood that humility is not the absence of power, but the choice to wield power under control. It is the decision to descend so that in due time one might be lifted, not by manipulation or force, but by divine appointment. Humility begins with a right view of self, not inflated, not diminished, but grounded. It sees strengths without boasting and acknowledges limitations without shame. It does not require constant validation because its worth is not dependent on external applause. A humble person can accept correction without defensiveness, celebrate others without jealousy, and serve without demanding recognition. This is not weakness, it is strength refined. In a world ruled by ego and driven by performance, the humble stand out not because they shine the brightest, but because they carry something weightier: peace, clarity, and quiet authority. Solomon knew that pride is deceptive. It begins subtly, often cloaked in ambition or disguised as confidence, but pride twists perspective. It inflates achievement and minimizes accountability. It resists instruction, despises correction, and ultimately isolates the heart. Proverbs 16 verse 18 is one of his most well-known warnings. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. This is not hyperbole. It is a prophetic insight into the trajectory of the unguarded heart. Where pride leads, collapse eventually follows. Not always instantly, but inevitably. And what makes pride dangerous is not just its arrogance, but its blindness. It cannot see danger coming because it refuses to look inward. In contrast, humility invites the light in. The humble seek understanding before offering opinion. They pause before reacting. They ask questions rather than assume answers. This posture makes them flexible, adaptable, and teachable, qualities that are indispensable for growth. A humble heart learns from both victories and mistakes. It listens more than it speaks, and when it speaks, its words carry weight because they flow from reflection, not impulse. Solomon's emphasis on humility is not merely about morality, it is strategic. The humble, being free from the need to always be right or first, often arrive at truth faster and go further with fewer wounds. Divine favor often follows humility not as a reward for good behavior, but as a response to alignment. When a person lives with a low posture before God and others, they make room for grace to operate. Humility is a vessel. It creates space for wisdom, for blessing, and for increase. God cannot fill what is already full of itself, but where there is emptiness, not in terms of worthlessness, but of surrendered ego, there is room for divine infilling. Proverbs 22 verse 4 connects humility to tangible outcomes. Humility is the fear of the Lord. Its wages are riches, honor, and life. This is a formula, not a metaphor. It reveals a spiritual cause and effect that transcends circumstance. The power of humility also lies in its ability to bridge relationships. Pride isolates, it builds walls, fosters competition, and sows mistrust. But humility builds bridges. It reconciles, restores, and refreshes. A humble leader listens. A humble spouse forgives. A humble friend encourages. This kind of presence carries healing in its wake. Solomon's wisdom shows that relational success is not a matter of charm or dominance, but of posture. Those who walk humbly cultivate trust, and trust is the currency of influence. In moments of conflict or failure, humility provides the quickest path to restoration. It allows one to say, "I was wrong," without losing dignity. It opens the door to feedback without fear. It diffuses tension and disarms criticism. The humble do not need to win every argument because they are not building a throne. They are building a legacy. And legacy is never shaped by ego, but by the quiet daily choice to serve, to grow, and to lead from beneath rather than above. Humility also shapes ambition. It does not kill dreams, but it purifies them. A humble person may still desire greatness, but their pursuit is no longer driven by insecurity or comparison. They seek to build, not to boast, to contribute, not to conquer. Their motivation is not approval, but alignment with purpose. And because their hands are open, not clenched, they are more ready to receive when promotion comes. Solomon saw that the proud often rise fast, but fall hard, while the humble may rise slowly, but stay elevated longer. This is not just wisdom for survival, it is wisdom for sustainability. One of the most overlooked expressions of humility is silence. Solomon often commends restraint in speech as a sign of wisdom. Proverbs 17 verse 28 states that even fools are thought wise if they keep silent, and discerning if they hold their tongues. This is not to suggest that silence is always right, but that measured response, born out of humility, carries more authority than loud declarations rooted in pride. The humble are not easily provoked because their identity is not fragile. They do not need to dominate conversation or demand attention because they are secure in their place and assignment. Humility also fosters spiritual sensitivity. The proud miss divine whispers because they are too consumed with their own voice. But the humble are attuned to the subtle, the quiet, the unseen. They hear guidance others miss. They sense shifts in season. They respond to conviction without delay. This level of awareness cannot be taught in theory. It is cultivated through practice. It grows as the heart continually chooses surrender over stubbornness, dependence over self-sufficiency, and reverence over self-will. In the end, humility is not about thinking less of oneself, but thinking of oneself less. It does not diminish value. It magnifies perspective. Solomon does not call for humiliation, but for alignment. When a life is built on humility, it becomes a channel for honor, because it does not absorb glory, but reflects it. The humble do not resist greatness. They redefine it. Greatness to them is not measured by how high one stands, but by how deeply one serves. When Solomon wrote in Proverbs 13 verse 20 that those who walk with the wise become wise, but a companion of fools suffers harm, he was not offering casual advice or issuing a social preference. He was revealing a spiritual law as consistent and consequential as gravity. In Solomon's worldview, influence is not optional, it is inevitable. Human beings are not isolated entities, immune to the people they surround themselves with. We are shaped, sharpened, or subtly sabotaged by those who walk alongside us. Solomon's warning is not rooted in suspicion, but in clarity. The path you travel is not only determined by your own steps, but also by the rhythm and direction of those who journey with you. This wisdom does not suggest judgmentalism or superiority. It does not teach avoidance of those who struggle or isolation from those who disagree. Instead, it invites deep discernment about relational proximity. There is a difference between loving all people and walking closely with all people. Solomon's insight draws a distinction between compassion and covenant. You may care for many, but you should covenant with few. Those granted access to your inner circle shape your thoughts, feed your emotions, influence your habits, and either propel you forward or quietly drain your momentum. Every relationship carries a weight, whether of nourishment or burden. Some connections inspire vision, awaken purpose, and challenge complacency. Others sow seeds of distraction, bitterness, or confusion. Solomon recognized that alignment in relationship is not a preference, it is a precondition for growth. Just as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. But this sharpening requires mutual intentionality. If one blade is dull or misaligned, friction produces sparks, not refinement. Walking with the wise means more than admiring intelligence. It means being willing to grow alongside those who are themselves submitted to truth. Divine connections often arrive not through appearance, charisma, or convenience, but through spiritual resonance. A wise companion is not necessarily the loudest, most visible, or most socially accepted. They may not flatter or agree with everything you say. In fact, they may challenge, correct, and stretch you, but always with love and purpose. Such relationships are marked by honesty, mutual honor, and shared values. When Solomon speaks of walking with the wise, he implies a consistent, ongoing journey. It is not occasional advice or superficial interaction. It is a pattern of life shaped by mutual pursuit of truth. Toxic alliances, on the other hand, are rarely loud at first. They often enter unnoticed, cloaked in familiarity, shared experiences, or emotional need. But over time, their impact becomes visible, energy diminishes, clarity fades, and purpose is slowly diluted. These relationships may not seem dangerous in the beginning, but they carry a silent erosion. The fool, in Proverbs, is not always aggressive or malicious. Often the fool is simply careless, disconnected from wisdom, dismissive of correction, and resistant to growth. When aligned with such individuals, even the wise risk compromise, because constant exposure to foolishness dulls discernment. It is worth noting that Solomon does not say the companion of fools becomes foolish. He says they suffer harm. The implication is that the danger is not merely intellectual but practical and consequential. A fool may choose recklessness and drag the innocent along. Their chaos becomes your crisis. Their instability becomes your burden. Their decisions ripple outward, pulling down not only their own life, but the lives of those attached to them. This is why discernment is not cruelty, it is wisdom. Who you walk with determines not only what you become, but what you must endure. Some may resist this idea, believing that love requires unconditional relational closeness. But love without boundaries becomes enabling. True love holds space for growth, but also establishes limits. Solomon teaches that wisdom builds the house, but also guards its gates. Not every guest belongs in every room. Relationships must be evaluated not only by emotional connection, but by spiritual fruit. Does this person pull you closer to your calling or further from it? Do your conversations produce insight or merely entertain distraction? Do your interactions stir courage or breed confusion? This evaluation is not rooted in arrogance, but stewardship. Just as a farmer must choose what seed to plant and what pests to resist, so must every person steward their relational soil. Planting good intentions in poor soil leads to frustration. Walking with fools, even with the best motives, often leads to detour. Some relationships require distance, not because the other person is less valuable, but because their influence is not safe for your purpose. Solomon's words are not permission to reject people, but a call to protect alignment. Choosing the company of the wise often requires intentional pursuit. Such individuals do not always present themselves readily. They may be hidden in seasons of preparation, overlooked in a culture that celebrates surface over depth. But when you find them, cherish them. These are the friends who pray with you in silence, speak truth when flattery would be easier, and remain when convenience fades. They do not compete, compare, or consume. They contribute. They see your blind spots without exploiting them. They know your flaws and still believe in your future, and their presence strengthens your spirit. Solomon also implies something deeper, that wisdom is contagious. To walk with the wise is not only to receive from them, but to become like them. Proximity breeds resemblance. The longer you walk with those rooted in purpose, the more you begin to see as they see, speak as they speak, and choose as they choose. This transformation is not the result of pressure, but of exposure. Atmospheres shape character, and wise environments produce wise outcomes. Conversely, the longer one walks with fools, the more normalized chaos becomes. Patterns of gossip, laziness, cynicism, or compromise begin to seem less dangerous. Standards are lowered, convictions softened, and before long, what once seemed unthinkable becomes acceptable. Solomon warns not to flirt with foolishness, but to avoid it. He understood that transformation works both ways, for better or for worse. This truth applies to every area of life: friendship, mentorship, romantic relationships, professional alliances. The same principle governs them all. Alignment is not about preference, but destiny. To walk with the wise is to protect your mission. To remain in fellowship with the foolish out of fear, sentiment, or nostalgia is to risk forfeiting what was meant for you. Sometimes the most spiritual decision you can make is to redefine your circle. Wisdom in relationship means asking hard questions with a willing heart. It means evaluating not just how someone makes you feel, but where they are leading you. It means recognizing that not every kind person is a wise influence, and not every wise person will always feel easy to be around. Discomfort does not always signal danger. Sometimes it signals growth, and often the ones who sharpen you the most are not those who agree with you, but those who remind you of who you really are and what you're called to become. Solomon's instruction, then, is both protective and empowering. It shields you from unnecessary harm, and it positions you for divine appointments. Right people at the right time often release the right doors. Wrong people, even with good intentions, can delay seasons, distort vision, and derail purpose. The company you keep is not just about companionship, it is about calling. It is about where you are going, who you are becoming, and what you are building. Solomon, the wealthiest and wisest king of his time, made a striking observation in Proverbs 10 verse 22. The blessing of the Lord makes rich, and he adds no sorrow with it. At first glance, this statement may seem like a simple affirmation of divine generosity, but under closer reflection, it reveals a profound distinction between the kind of prosperity that comes from heaven and the version often pursued in the world. Solomon did not equate riches with blessing alone, nor did he imply that wealth was inherently virtuous. Instead, he marked a difference between riches born of divine favor and riches born of striving. One enriches and sustains, the other exhausts and entangles. In Solomon's understanding, wealth was not an end in itself, but a byproduct of alignment. True prosperity, lasting, joyful, and peaceful, flows from righteousness, not ambition. It is built on a foundation of faithfulness, not manipulation. It is cultivated through generosity, not hoarding. These principles run counter to many of today's teachings that reduce prosperity to formulas or treat material success as the sole evidence of divine approval. Solomon's insight cuts through such distortions, reminding us that God's way to wealth includes not just the accumulation of resources, but the absence of sorrow, anxiety, and bondage. Worldly wealth is often pursued through relentless pressure, sleepless striving, and comparison-driven labor. It rewards performance, inflates ego, and ultimately burdens the soul. Many who appear prosperous outwardly carry a hidden cost in broken relationships, compromised integrity, physical exhaustion, or spiritual emptiness. This is the sorrow Solomon speaks of, not necessarily the lack of money, but the loss of peace that often accompanies wealth, pursued outside of divine design. When prosperity becomes disconnected from purpose and character, it becomes a weight rather than a reward. The blessing of the Lord is different. It does not come through schemes or shortcuts. It arrives through order, stewardship, and surrender. It is not reactive to market trends or dependent on manipulation of people. Rather, it flows through principles that remain unchanged across generations. Righteousness, generosity, diligence, and wisdom are not only moral ideals, they are keys to abundance. Solomon's own wealth was not the result of a personal campaign, but a divine response. When he asked for wisdom instead of riches, God gave him both because his priorities were in alignment. This chapter is not an argument against material blessing, nor does it romanticize lack. Scripture is clear that God takes pleasure in the prosperity of his servants, and Solomon himself testifies to the goodness of increase when handled rightly. But there is a difference between blessing and burden. Wealth, when obtained through the hand of God, is accompanied by clarity, rest, and multiplication. It grows without consuming the soul. It expands without destroying peace. It blesses generations instead of breaking them. This is prosperity without sorrow, not an illusion, but a reality for those who walk according to divine wisdom. One of the central pillars of this kind of wealth is faithfulness. Solomon repeatedly emphasizes that steady, honest labor produces increase. In Proverbs 13, verse 11, he writes that dishonest money dwindles away, but whoever gathers money little by little makes it grow. The pace of increase, when governed by faithfulness, may seem slow by worldly standards, but it is steady and sustainable. Faithfulness builds not only wealth, but the character required to manage it. And in God's economy, who you are becoming matters just as much as what you are receiving. Another key is generosity. Far from reducing one's resources, generosity opens the gates of supernatural flow. Proverbs 11 verse 24 captures this paradox perfectly. One person gives freely, yet gains even more. Another withholds unduly, but comes to poverty. This principle runs against the grain of scarcity thinking, which assumes that giving depletes and hoarding secures. But Solomon knew that giving is a declaration of trust, an act that places confidence not in possessions, but in the provider. Generosity aligns the heart with heaven's rhythm and keeps wealth from becoming an idol. It transforms money from a master into a tool. Divine prosperity also requires wisdom. Without it, wealth amplifies dysfunction. Solomon observed that an inheritance quickly gained at the beginning will not be blessed in the end. Why? Because resources handed to an unprepared soul often lead to destruction. Wisdom teaches timing, discernment, and restraint. It shows when to invest and when to wait, when to speak and when to listen, when to build and when to protect. Prosperity without wisdom is temporary, but when wisdom governs, increase becomes legacy. There is also a crucial connection between divine order and financial peace. Solomon's writings consistently link obedience to provision. This does not mean a rigid transactional relationship where every act of obedience results in a deposit. Instead, it reflects a deeper truth, that God's ways are designed for wholeness. When life is aligned with His principles, honesty, diligence, generosity, stewardship, prosperity becomes the natural outflow. The order of heaven produces fruit on earth, not through striving, but through alignment. Anxiety, which so often accompanies worldly wealth, has no place in the blessing Solomon describes. This is not because challenges disappear, but because the foundation is secure. Those who walk in divine prosperity are not controlled by economic shifts, social pressure, or performance expectations. Their peace is rooted not in the balance of their accounts, but in the source of their provision. The blessing of the Lord is a refuge. It surrounds, protects, and multiplies without exacting a toll on the soul. This kind of prosperity also manifests in more than finances. It touches relationships, health, time, and purpose. Solomon's life in its early years was marked by abundance in every direction, peace in his kingdom, honor among nations, wisdom in counsel. These were not accidental. They were the fruit of a life aligned with God's instruction. The blessing of the Lord encompasses wholeness. It builds without burning out. It expands without compromising values. It establishes without destabilizing identity. Yet Solomon's later years remind us that even divinely given prosperity must be guarded. His drift into idolatry and compromise led to unrest, division, and loss. Wealth alone does not preserve itself. It must be anchored in continued humility and obedience. Prosperity is not self-sustaining. It must be stewarded with reverence. What begins in blessing can be turned into burden if it is removed from its source. This is why Solomon's early wisdom rings so loudly: seek first the giver, not the gift. And when the gift arrives, let it serve the purpose of heaven, not the appetites of the flesh. Solomon invites the reader to see wealth not as a trophy, but as a tool. It is not to be worshipped nor feared, but understood. In the hands of the wise it feeds the hungry, builds communities, funds vision, and extends legacy. In the hands of the prideful it isolates, corrupts, and deceives. The question is not whether wealth is good, but whether the soul is ready to carry it. The blessing of the Lord makes rich, yes, but only to the degree that it can be trusted to flow through, not just to. When Solomon writes in Proverbs 25 verse 28 that a person without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls, he is not using metaphor for drama's sake. He is issuing a sober warning grounded in both spiritual insight and practical experience. In the ancient world, a city's walls were its primary means of defense. Without them, no matter how strong the warriors or how rich the treasury, the city was vulnerable. Its treasures could be stolen, its people harmed, its stability compromised by any passing enemy. Solomon equates this physical vulnerability to the spiritual and emotional exposure that comes from a life lacking restraint. Without self-control, all that one builds, whether in relationships, influence, wealth, or purpose, remains at risk, unguarded and unstable. Self-control is often misunderstood. To many, it appears as mere suppression, a constant denial of pleasure or desire. But Solomon's wisdom reveals something far deeper. Restraint is not about deprivation, it is about direction. It is the ability to say yes and no with wisdom, to delay gratification for greater reward, to choose long-term purpose over short-term satisfaction. It is not the absence of feeling, but the governing of it. Emotion, desire, and drive are not enemies. In fact, they are often vital to movement and momentum, but when left unchecked, they can also lead to ruin. The disciplined soul does not kill passion, it channels it. Solomon understood that the lack of self-control is not a minor flaw, it is a structural weakness. Without it, wisdom becomes dormant, insight collapses under pressure, and gifts are squandered. A person may be talented, resourceful, or favored, but without the internal structure of discipline, that favor can be lost. Consider how many people have risen in visibility or wealth only to fall in disgrace. Their downfall was not due to lack of opportunity, but lack of restraint. Whether through unguarded speech, financial recklessness, or unchecked appetites, the absence of self-control made them vulnerable. Solomon's metaphor of a breached city captures this vividly. The exposure is not gradual, it is catastrophic. Yet self-control is not limited to crisis prevention. It is also the key to sustainable excellence. The one who governs their emotions is not easily manipulated. The one who rules over their appetite is not led by cravings. The one who controls their schedule is not enslaved to urgency. This mastery produces clarity, peace, and strength that endures. Solomon's model is not stoicism, but stewardship. He does not teach detachment, but alignment. To live with self-control is to honor the boundaries that protect purpose. It is to guard what has been entrusted and to cultivate what has been planted. In areas like finances, the importance of restraint becomes immediately visible. Proverbs is filled with warnings against quick riches, excessive debt, and impulsive spending. Solomon observed that steady growth through diligent stewardship leads to peace, while hastiness leads to lack. Self-control in money is not about withholding joy. It is about creating margin, preparing for seasons, and ensuring that prosperity serves the person rather than enslaves them. Without such restraint, wealth becomes volatile, easily lost, and anxiously maintained. The same applies to speech. Solomon repeatedly addresses the power of the tongue, but without self-control, even wise words can turn harmful. Proverbs 29 verse 11 states that a fool gives full vent to his spirit, but a wise man quietly holds it back. This is not a call to silence, but to intentionality. The disciplined person knows when to speak and when to listen, when to confront and when to wait. They do not allow emotion to dictate every expression. In doing so, they build trust, avoid unnecessary conflict, and preserve relationships that might otherwise be damaged by rash outbursts. Desires and impulses, particularly in areas of intimacy and pleasure, also demand vigilance. Solomon's own life provides a sobering reflection of this truth. Despite all his wisdom, his indulgence in relationships not aligned with divine instruction led to spiritual decline and eventual division in his kingdom. His failure was not intellectual, it was a breach in self-control. Passion, when left ungoverned, distorts judgment. What begins as desire can easily become domination, where the person is no longer leading their appetites, but being led by them. However, self-control is not solely a matter of willpower. It is a spiritual grace, empowered by alignment with divine order. The human will is limited. It tires, bends under pressure, and falters in seasons of testing. But when the Spirit is allowed to shape discipline from within, what emerges is not just behavior modification, but character transformation. This is why restraint in Solomon's world is not a burden. It is a fortress. It is not reactive. It is proactive. The one who lives with discipline lives with strength, not just for personal gain, but to sustain calling and influence over time. The practice of self-control also produces freedom. This may seem paradoxical, but it is true. Those who live without restraint are not free. They are bound by habits, by moods, by the approval of others, or by the demands of impulse. True freedom is the ability to choose wisely, consistently, regardless of emotion or pressure. It is the power to delay, to reflect, to say no when everything screams yes, and to say yes when fear tempts no. Solomon's wisdom leads us to a kind of sovereignty over the inner life that makes external chaos less threatening. In leadership, this quality is indispensable. A leader without self-control will burn out, lash out, or sell out. They may inspire for a time, but their influence will eventually crack under the weight of their own inconsistencies. Solomon presents restraint as a quiet strength, not the kind that demands recognition, but the kind that builds credibility. The disciplined leader gains trust, not because they are flawless, but because they are stable. They do not swing wildly between extremes. They walk with steadiness, and that steadiness makes them dependable in crisis. Discipline in time is another area Solomon emphasizes. The lazy miss opportunity not because they are unskilled, but because they do not manage seasons. The disciplined person wakes with purpose, stewarding hours like currency. They understand that time cannot be reclaimed, and so they treat each day as a deposit into destiny. Their restraint is not rooted in fear of failure, but in reverence for purpose. They do not waste today, assuming tomorrow will compensate. They move deliberately, choosing what matters over what is easy. Solomon's perspective on self-control is not legalistic. It is liberating. He does not call for a rigid, joyless life. Instead, he offers a path to wholeness where desire is not denied, but directed, where emotion is not suppressed, but submitted, where impulse is not condemned, but trained. And in doing so, he builds a vision for a life that is not only prosperous, but protected. A life where wisdom is not an abstract concept, but a daily practice. A life where calling is not a fragile gift, but a fortified reality. As Solomon's writings come together into a unified vision, we begin to understand that his proverbs are not scattered reflections or disjointed sayings. They form a complete, interwoven tapestry, one in which each thread strengthens the others, and each principle depends upon the next. In this final layer of his teaching, Solomon reveals that the ultimate key to lasting success and meaningful prosperity is not found in isolated truths, but in a way of life marked by wisdom, obedience, and divine favor. These are not random traits to admire. They are the essential components of a spiritual formula that, when followed, produces a life of fruitfulness, influence, and inner stability. Wisdom, as Solomon defines it, is not a mere accumulation of knowledge or the ability to make clever decisions. It is the embodiment of insight that flows from reverence for God and is expressed through choices aligned with truth. It is both reflective and active, something to be cherished and something to be applied. Solomon does not separate wisdom from obedience, because to know what is right without doing it is, in his view, not wisdom at all. The wise are not those who simply understand, they are those who act accordingly. Every principle in Proverbs, from guarding the heart to speaking life, from choosing good company to walking in humility, only bears fruit when it is lived out with intentionality. Obedience, then, becomes the proof of wisdom. It is the daily response of the heart that says, "Not my will, but what is right." It is the consistent act of aligning choices with truth, even when feelings or circumstances push in the opposite direction. Solomon's entire framework depends on this. The fear of the Lord, the beginning of wisdom, produces an obedient posture. This posture leads to decisions that reflect God's nature and design, and through those decisions, favor is drawn like a magnet. Not favor earned through performance, but favor attracted by alignment. Divine favor, in Solomon's world, is not random blessing or unexplainable luck. It is the response of heaven to a life ordered according to wisdom. It is what opens doors no man can shut, places one before kings, grants influence beyond what effort alone could secure. Favor does not always mean ease, but it does mean access. It means that God entrusts more to those who have shown themselves faithful with less. It means that opportunities arise in perfect timing, relationships are divinely orchestrated, and solutions emerge in moments of need. But this favor does not rest on charisma, heritage, or ambition. It rests on obedience. Solomon teaches us that there is no lasting promotion without surrender, no enduring honor without humility, and no peace in prosperity without a foundation of righteousness. When all his teachings are brought together, they form a clear equation. Reverence births wisdom. Wisdom produces obedience. Obedience draws favor. And favor leads to a kind of success that is free of sorrow, pride, and regret. This formula is not hidden in complexity. It is hidden in plain sight, obscured not by mystery, but by distraction. The world offers shortcuts, but they cost integrity. It offers speed, but it rarely offers peace. Solomon's way is slower, deeper, and more enduring. It is not about moments of brilliance, but a lifestyle of alignment. It is not about outward success alone, but inward transformation that overflows into every part of life. So what remains is a question, not of whether the wisdom works, but of whether we will walk in it. The Proverbs are not theoretical, they are blueprints. They require not passive admiration, but active implementation. Those who take them seriously will find that they still open doors, still break cycles, still bring favor, and still lead to a prosperity that cannot be stolen by the world or shattered by time. You have just journeyed through the wisdom of Solomon, words breathed into history, preserved through centuries, and still alive with power today. These are not outdated religious slogans. They are living strategies for success, formulas for peace, and treasures of the kingdom waiting to be walked out in everyday life. If this message spoke to you, I invite you now to support this journey of truth and wisdom. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss a new message. Like this video to help others find it. Leave a comment below and share how this wisdom is shaping your own life. We read everyone, and most importantly, share this with someone you love. Let the light that has touched you shine into another heart today. Thank you for being part of this journey. Let Solomon's wisdom live in you. May you walk in truth, live in favor, and prosper without sorrow.